As you know, our oceans cover 70% of the planet, but what you might not know is that our oceans are a carbon sink. This means that they trap in carbon dioxide and release oxygen, which is incredibly important in this era where our atmosphere is consistently polluted with CO2. We decided to do our project on the United Nations 14th Goal of Sustainable Development, Life Below Water. The program we chose is the Ocean Cleanup, which you will learn about later on in this video. The United Nations 14th Goal for Sustainable Development is Life Below Water. This goal aims to conserve and sustainably use oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development.
So the oceans face five major challenges globally. These include overfishing, loss of ocean and coastal habitat like coral reefs and mangroves, invasive species, species that are often carried in ship ballast water and on their hulls that can create havoc in ecosystems when they're introduced. Pollution, particularly pollution from nutrients off farms, off wastewater, and also from plastics. The growing issue is marine plastics. And then lastly, a major issue linked to climate change is called ocean acidification, where a lot of the CO2 that's building up in the atmosphere from anthropogenic emissions of carbon dioxide are causing the oceans to acidify perhaps at the fastest rate in at least 35 million years.
In 2017, the increasingly adverse impacts of climate change, overfishing, and marine pollution are jeopardizing recent gains in protecting portions of the world's oceans. According to the United Nations, there has not been sufficient progress on conserving or sustainably using our oceans. Unfortunately, there has been continuous deterioration of coastal waters around the globe. Programs like the Ocean Cleanup are crucial to conserving our oceans. Implementing programs like this one will allow for progress to be made on the conservation and sustainable use of oceans. Progress in ocean conservation and sustainability are crucial to achieving the UN's 2030 agenda.
Marine debris or trash find their way to the ocean. And while many different types of trash enter the ocean, plastic make up the majority of marine debris. Why? Firstly, because plastic's durability, low cost, and malleability mean that it's being used in more and more consumer and industrial products. And secondly, because plastic goods do not biodegrade, but instead break down into smaller pieces. Once entered the ocean, marine debris are carried by oceanic currents and atmospheric winds, and find themselves entering gyres. A gyre is a large system of rotating ocean currents that spiral around a central point. It is formed by Earth's wind patterns and forces created by the planet's rotation. There are 5 major oceanic gyres, the most notable one being the North Pacific Gyre. The circular motion of the gyre draws debris to the center, which is very calm and stable. This results in the debris getting trapped, which creates a garbage patch. The North Pacific Garbage Patch is comprised of the Western Garbage Patch, located near Japan, and the Eastern Garbage Patch, located halfway between Hawaii and California. It takes approximately 6 years from trash from the coast of North America and a year from the trash from Japan and other Asian countries to make it to the garbage patches. It has been estimated that 80% of the debris in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch come from land-based activities in North America and Asia, while the other 20% comes from boaters, offshore oil rigs, and large cargo ships that dump or lose debris. For many people, the idea of a garbage patch conjures up images of an island of trash floating in the ocean. But these patches are almost entirely made up of tiny bits of plastic called microplastics, which gives water the aspect of a cloudy soup. Pacific Garbage Patch is home to about 7 billion tons of plastic and has a density of up to 750,000 bits of microplastic per square kilometer. There are 4 major impacts of marine debris on ocean life. The first one being habitat damage. Marine debris can damage marine habitats like coral reef. These habitats are the basis of marine ecosystems and are critical to the survival of many species. Wildlife entanglement is the second impact and one of the most notable ones. The variety of marine debris like derelict fishing gear, packing bands, 6-pack rings can wrap around marine life, which leads to injury, illness, suffocation, starvation, and eventually even death. The third impact is ingestion. Marine debris can easily be mistaken for food or accidentally ingested with food by marine wildlife, resulting in internal injuries, intestinal blockage, loss of nutrition, and sometimes even death. The last impact is alien species transport. Marine organisms can attach to debris and travel due to currents on them, eventually landing on shoreline where they are non-native. some invasive species can have devastating impacts on established marine ecosystems. It is estimated that the size of the garbage patch ranges between 700,000 square kilometers and over 15 million square kilometers. Actual size is very difficult to determine since the debris consists of small plastic particles suspended at or just below the water surface, making it difficult to accurately detect by aircraft or satellite.
There are 5 areas in the world where ocean currents concentrate the plastic, and the largest one of these accumulations is the infamous Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is the one halfway between Hawaii and California.
When the public thinks of patch, they think of a region you could walk on an island, when it's not that at all.
It's more like a soup of plastic specks that looks like confetti.
And here's a graph showing the concentration of plastic in that Great Pacific Garbage Patch, going from, say, the 1950s, 1960s on the left, all the way to very recently. And I think this is the one image that shows what it's all about. It's getting worse, fast.
The Ocean Cleanup Project, there is one motto engineers kept going back to: act like plastic. This ultimately shaped the latest model of the system. Recognizing that the majority of plastics reside at the surface of the ocean, they knew the majority of the cleanup work would have to happen here. The new model is comprised of 3 parts. First is a curved arm about 1 kilometer long that floats on the surface of the water. Attached to this is a solid skirt which acts like a screen to trap surface plastic. A key factor here is that the skirt does not go very deep into the water, which allows marine life to pass beneath it. 2 cords attach to each end of the arm and are joined to the same anchor suspended at a lower depth. A key component to the new model is that it is tethered to an anchor instead of being directly tethered to the ocean floor, which had originally stirred a lot of critique and skepticism in the scientific community. The motto of act like plastic really came into play with the realization that currents are quicker at the surface than at lower depths. At the ocean's surface, winds are the principal driving force, while deeper currents are also driven by other forces like a density gradient. By suspending an anchor at a deeper depth, say between 600 and 800 meters, the entire system moves with the surface current but is effectively slowed down by the anchor. The system then becomes susceptible to the same mechanisms moving the plastic. This means that where the plastic goes, the system goes. Reinventing the original model to one that is manipulated by the same forces as the plastic, the founders realized they'd no longer be building just one huge system, but many smaller ones acting as a fleet. Not only is this more cost-effective, but it's a more effective cleanup strategy. The following video is a demonstration of how the cleanup system works as presented by Boyan Slat and his fellow engineer at the unveiling of the new model in May 2017.
So what you see here is a basin that we filled with water. And what we've done here is we've basically recreated the conditions as you would find them in the ocean. So we have fast current at the surface and a slow current at depth. And actually you can see that right here. We have this stick with the lines attached to it. You can see the lines are taut at the surface, so fast current here, slow current at depth. And now I would like to ask Bruno, one of our best scientists of the team, to, yes, Bruno, to deploy a scale model of one such cleanup system. So we see an anchor here, we see a barrier at the surface, anchor at depth, connected to each other, and you see it starts to drift. But then when we release some plastic, let's see what happens. So we see the cleanup system moves, but the plastic moves too, but moves faster than the cleanup system. So you see the plastic coming closer to the system, moving faster, hitting the barrier, moving towards the barrier, in the center of the barrier, hitting the barrier, moving towards the center, and you can see, it's catching the plastic. The question was, well, where do they drift towards? Well, to answer this question, we built this computer model, and what we see here are basically 50 white shapes, and each white shape represents one cleanup system, and then all these small blue dots, that's plastic. And then when we start to play this, you can see that indeed these cleanup system moves around, The plastic wiggles around as well. And what you'll notice is that areas start to form where there's more plastic. So these bluer areas and areas where there's less plastic. So these darker areas. And then if you look closely, what you may be able to spot is that what you see is that there, where there is a lot of plastic, you also see a lot of cleanup systems. And that is, of course, because the forces moving the plastic around are the same forces that move these cleanup systems around. So in other words, and so the waves, the winds and currents we're talking about, right? So in other words, there where the plastic goes, these cleanup systems automatically drift to as well. And in a way, it's like a plastic magnet. And because of this plastic magnet effect, it now turns out that the concentration of plastic in front of these cleanup systems is actually 5 to 10 times higher than what they would see if they would just be fixed in a single location. And that is what I meant when I said acting like the plastic.
One of the key important milestones in this cleanup project will include the following. The plastic that will be collected and brought back to shore will be recycled and sold to B2C companies, and this revenue will allow for the project to clean up the 4 other oceans afterwards. It will further reinforce the ocean cleanup to become a sustainable technology, and one important year in the development of this project was the year 2014. In 2014, the crowdfund campaign allowed for SLAT to raise $2.2 million from 38,000 people and also from 160 different countries and nations around the world. There have been some scale models in 2016 and 2017 that have been deployed in the North Sea. This is very important for the mission as well. 2017, which is the current year, has allowed for preparation of the real mission, which will be deployed in 2018. This will also allow for us to prepare for when the cleanup will begin and the finalization of some engineering details, which will be tested. 2018, there will be trials for the American West Coast as well. Our first cleanup system will take place in May of 2018. 2020, the projected timeline indicates that there will be the cleanup of the 4 other oceans.
We've done some recent analysis that show that taking some of the key sectoral changes and reforms that are needed to sustain the oceans would probably in most cases create net new jobs. So whether it's improving recycling programs for plastics, which will create jobs.
Next topic is the projected results and the global impact of the Sustainable Development Goal and the ocean cleanup. It's estimated that within 5 years' time, the Great Pacific Patch will be cleaned up by half of what it is now. It will be reduced by 50%. Ian Slatt describes this as diffusing this ticking time bomb. For the environment, plastic bottles is one major concern when it does come to environmental issues. And according to the Ocean Cleanup website, this impacts more than 600 marine species. In addition, one global impact for the economy, estimated by the United Nations, is that plastic costs a total of $13 billion per year. This impacts many different sectors such as tourism, marine life, fisheries, and many businesses. This also has a global impact on our health, seeing as plastic does carry toxic pollutants to each and every one of us, and this includes telescopic effects by marine consumption.
Now you come to the plastic graveyard here in the ocean.
The washed-up remains of a throwaway society.
Now you see the enormity of the problem.
Any major project that aims to find a solution to a major issue, the ocean cleanup does give rise to some concerns and critiques amongst scientists, oceanographers, biologists, and so on. One of these is mainly the question of why don't we wait until the plastic breaks down? Although this could be possible, Slatt argues that most of the plastic that we do find within the garbage patch are large pieces of plastic. He explains that it takes over 450 years for a plastic bottle to decompose. Waiting for the plastic to break down would take a lot of time and will only cause further damage to the existing biodiversity. He also discusses microplastic, which is what is usually found within the stomachs of marine life species. Microplastic is essentially when bigger plastic breaks down through the process of deterioration that is caused by sunlight. These little pieces of plastic become more brittle and more harmful to species. This is why waiting for the plastic to break down is not a solution and would only cause further damage.
This isn't litter that's been dropped on the beach. It's come in from the sea, recklessly thrown away, distributed on the currents, and then swept ashore.
This is the most dangerous, the blue one. It's a single-use plastic. And this, if it gets down, you had it. This is all in the mall. This is from the mall.
From the shopping mall.
Shopping mall. This is so prevalent in Indian shopping mall.
Afros inspired the world's biggest ever beach clean. Once a week, volunteers clear what they can, knowing full well that the next tide will lay a new carpet of plastic.
The ocean cleanup technology is deployed into the middle of the ocean where it aims to clean up the garbage that has accumulated in that area. Critiques of these methods believe that cleanup at the gyres would be a waste of effort as plastic will disappear 10 to 20 years from now. They also believe that a high-tech cleanup system could distract from other necessary efforts to lessen the use of plastic. We should focus on reducing the amount of plastic that enters the ocean, which is a cultural effort. Cara Lavender Law, which is part of the Sea Education Association, explained that the ocean cleanup would be like mopping up the bathroom floor without turning off the faucet of the tub, largely because we are not addressing the problem at its source and that humans will continue to dump 19 billion pounds of garbage in the ocean per year. Although Slat does not disagree, he does argue that ocean garbage patches won't disappear by themselves, and that if we collect plastic closer to the source, the total mass that you remove may be larger and the influx to the gyres will be reduced. However, the focus of the ocean cleanup is to remove the plastic that has already reached the gyres before it causes further damage.
Worldwide, the equivalent of one rubbish truck of plastic waste is being dumped into the ocean every minute. By 2050, the trash in the sea is likely to weigh more than all of the fish.
Another major concern is whether or not the technology will be able to withstand ocean currents, such as storms and so on. The system itself is designed to move as the plastic. Essentially, what they mean by this is that it will move with the natural currents within the ocean. They actually found that if they use floating anchors that are attached to the large barriers, that floating anchors actually start to move towards the plastic and act like the plastic and gravitate towards where the most of the waste is, and this is usually what allows them to collect more trash. Before, their previous approach would have been anchoring the barrier, which would have potentially have not had the ability to collect as much garbage. So if we use a system that goes with the natural currents, we have less of a chance of disrupting currents and naturally occurring systems, and we facilitate the process by which we collect garbage.
The tiny pieces are called microplastic. It's eaten by sea creatures and ends up in our food.
This portion of microcyst contains about 90 particles of plastic.
This scientist carried out the first comprehensive risk assessment, shown exclusively to Sky News, which suggests that the microplastic can be absorbed into our bloodstream. His research shows that by the end of the century, as many as 4,000 tiny fragments a year could build up in the body.
I've asked many physicians, colleagues, professors, and so on, what could microplastic do when it gets into our blood system? And the blunt answer was, we don't know. So we don't.
Another major concern is how the ocean cleanup technology will have exerted its effects on marine life. As one of the main criticisms, the technology is believed to have a high potential for bycatch. Species such as plankton and purple gentina snails actually live at the surface of the gyre, and it is believed that the technology would only endanger these species by catching them along with larger pieces of plastic. Andrew David Thaler, who is a deep sea biologist, also argues that the V-shape of the technology concentrates debris at the center, which has a high potential to attract predator and prey species. This can disrupt their behavior and migration patterns, which makes them more susceptible to consuming the plastic. It is also criticized for the disruption of existing ecosystems. When plastic is within the ocean, it becomes colonized by living organisms. In order to avoid this process, which is known as biofouling, chemicals such as biocidal coatings are needed in order to avoid the colonization of living organisms onto these objects. The technology of the ocean cleanup system would require one of these coatings. However, these coatings are criticized to be damaging to ocean microorganisms and other sea life. Slat argues that the design is essentially made so that sea life can pass through unimpeded. He also argues that animals are currently suffering as their habitats are being damaged. There is wildlife entanglement in ghost fishing. Animals are currently ingesting the plastic, and they are being transported to other areas as they attach to the plastic. In other words, the damage that is being caused currently by the plastic does sort of outweigh potential damage that could be caused. The technology has not been deployed, and although these are major concerns, they can be monitored.
With so much plastic blocking its system, the bird wouldn't have felt hungry and probably starved to death.
It's suffering from our mistakes, and it's a disgrace for mankind, I think, that you find this in animals.
Cleaned and carefully laid out, this is the inventory of the bird's gizzard. 18 pieces of plastic weighing half a gram. Scaled up to a human, that's a lunchbox of trash. Our waste, recklessly disposed of, is in the ocean food chain, and it's coming back to haunt us.
What you would expect is that the more you slow down the system, the more plastic you would collect, right? But actually, the opposite is the case. Because the less you slow down, the more you act like the plastic, the more these cleanup systems will gravitate towards those high density zones and therefore catch more plastic. Well, how much more plastic, I hear you thinking. We'll get to that. So what we see here is a map of how the Great Pacific Garbage Patch will look like in 2030 if we don't clean up. Now this is pretty bad, okay? We see that, in an area the size of California, we already get to concentrations that are, say, 3-4 times higher than what it is today. And then what would the garbage patch look like if our plan succeeds? Well, this is the result. And remember this graph that I showed you at the beginning? Well, of course, we also calculated what's going to happen if our plan succeeds. And let's have a look at the results there. It's pretty incredible. So, well.
Although there are some challenges to be faced by the ocean cleanup, founder Boyan Slat remains open to modifications. He believes that it is essential to research, test, fail, learn, and repeat until success is reached. Although critiques address significant issues such as the efficiency of the technology, the only way we can really know if the system works is if we try it out. There are currently no efforts being taken to clean the garbage patch, and Boyan's effort is better than none. As discussed, plastic can take centuries to break down, and waiting for this to happen is not a solution. Species are currently at risk of ingesting the plastic, and we are already observing the effects of marine debris through habitat damage, ghost fishing, and wildlife entanglement. As Boyan says, it is time to defuse the ticking time bomb and address the urgency of environmental issues. Our ocean is crucial and plays a vital role in upholding further ecological systems. This is why we must protect it. Ocean cleanup is one of the solutions that will allow us to uphold the sustainability goals of ocean conservation. We must continue to search for these solutions and implement them with urgency. For this, systems must interact at both the societal and governmental level.